Hey, Spuddies, Potato Whiskey here, and today we're going to be going over the update 1.2.0, April 22nd. It is the day after, because I was playing D&D yesterday. So, hey Civ fans, we have just rolled out update 1.2.0. This brings us several highly requested improvements, balance changes, and new features, many of which were shaped directly by your feedback. I still think the developers should put like a little Sid Meier emoji or something, a little star beside any of the patch notes that were inspired by community feedback. I think that would be a really good way just to let the community know what pieces of feedback have been taken in and actually inspired by the community, because I think that would be a really, really good visual way to just reinforce the relationship between the developers and the community. And I think it's just straight up a mistake to not do that. A note for Switch players. So Switch players won't have it for a little while. It'll be available when the Switch 2 releases. It's frustrating. I appreciate your patience. This extra time will be working as intended while laying the groundwork, upgrade path, blah, 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 blah. Cross-platform DLC. So multiplayer team. So basically, the Switch won't have it until June. In this update, you'll find the return of multiplayer teams, a rework to how food and growth scale over time, and significant updates to resources. I have a lot of thoughts about food and growth. I actually was working on a video on food and growth until I saw the developers planning to rework it. And my hot take is I do not think that how they plan on reworking it is going to make a significant difference, and we'll probably go over that in the food and growth video once I get time. Significant updates to resources and more. We've highlighted the biggest changes in the feature spotlight section down below, and further down you'll find full notes covering the addressed issues, AI improvements, UI polish, and several more changes under the hood. If you read our April 8 update check-in, this was this one here. I did not read this. Updates to resources, population, one more turn, teams, and a few other things. Awesome. So they've added new resources, and they do look very pretty. Big updates have been made to resources in Civ 7. Update 1.2.0 sets the stage for a lot of what's coming next, especially as we refine core systems, improve the UI and pacing, and support the game with more ways to play. Okay, cool. So there's 10 new resources that are added: mangoes, clay, flax, rubies, rice, limestone, tin, llamas, hardwood, and wild game. All of these can appear in the Antiquity Age or Exploration Age, and rice, limestone, tin, llamas, and hardwood appear in the Modern Age. I feel like all of them. So some of them disappear later on in the game. Cool. These new resources come with their own effects, as well as at least one narrative event for each. Very cool. In addition to these new resources, we're spicing up resource distribution with randomized resource generation. New placement logic will help keep each age unique and strategic. Don't worry, the resources you still need to complete legacy paths will be available. And certain resources are now gated by continent or hemisphere, with a change we're calling hemisphere identity. This update also reimagines how treasure resources work. They're no longer just for treasure fleets, but have passive bonuses to your empire and are more clearly divided between homelands and distant lands, with unique icons and tooltips to make the roles clearer. We've expanded the list of treasure resources too, including horses, furs, and rubies. Okay, very interesting. Finally, we've made balance changes to existing resources, like making dyes more potent for happiness, turning fish into a bonus resources, and introducing tin as a new factory resource that improves your growth rate. Interesting. So there's a few little shuffles around. We hope these updates bring more flavor and strategy to resource management, but more improvements and additions to the resources still in work, including improvements to the resource screen itself. Also a little hint from the developers as to what's to come. These updates lay needed groundwork at expanding the multiplayer player count in the Antiquity Age and enabling distant land starts in all ages to satisfy in a satisfying way. More on that in future. So it looks like, wow, that's really cool. So it looks like they made some compromises with the way that the game was designed on launch in order to avoid certain problems, and now they're laying the groundwork to avoid those problems, and it looks like it had mostly to do with like the lack of resources and the way that the distant lands were programmed. So one more turn. We know that you've been waiting for this one. Endless play is here. Now players will have the option to play just one more turn during a single player game at the end of the Modern Age. At this point in the game, a victory has already been won, so all other victories will be disabled during this game mode, and the age progress indicator will turn into an infinity symbol. I kind of wish you could choose this in any age. However, you can still complete the steps for other victories, get the cinematics, and experiment with your empire if you just want to see it play out. You're still able to grab legacy path achievements if you haven't already. If you do choose to end your endless game, you can do so by selecting no more turns in the game menu. Very cool. So one more turn is now finally back in Civilization 7. It only took a few months. What has it been now? It's February 11th. Has it been like 2 months and a bit? 2 months and change? So food and growth rebalance. We heard you loud and clear on this one. Food and population needed some dev TLC. The old system for growth had some bottlenecks, making it much less valuable yield compared to science, production, and culture. So in update 1.2, we've reworked the underlying math to make food more reliable and rewarding a rewarding yield across the entire game. We've removed the hard cap that used to block growth when gaining food. Hard cap! And changed the way growth scales. Instead of following a cubic formula, where costs ramped up fast, we've shifted to a quadratic curve, meaning your settlements now still slow down as they get larger, but pacing should feel more natural. Food-focused strategies are finally viable all game long. Food-focused civs and leaders, look at you, Patrick, will feel stronger and fun to play. AI behavior has improved since they can now leverage high food starts and avoid bottlenecks that used to limit their expansion. You may even find you need to turn your difficulty settings down a notch. Okay. We'll talk a little bit about this, but man, I think there's a few things that we just need to talk about why I think food doesn't work. Multiplayer teams. Multiplayer teams are finally back. Very cool. Teams share visibility, relationship, blah, 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 blah. And then the actual update notes here. So this is the meat and the potatoes. This is what we're talking about, right? So resources. They've added 10 new resources to the game. Unfortunately, they don't give details on what the resources are. But more resources can only be a good thing. It adds diversity, increases the, intrigue, improves trading. It just generally makes the game more diverse and interesting, hopefully. I do like that each resource is getting a narrative event, and I like that resources are randomized on new game starts. I also like that there are new placement rules so that there are more consistent resource distributions in ages and more changes between the age transitions. I like that. It's going to be interesting. It's going to change the way the game feels and plays. I also really appreciate that some of the resources in the exploration of modern age related to the economic legacy paths will only appear in one hemisphere or the other. Now, I think that means north-south divide, which will require you to do some trading, which I appreciate. It's like, oh, look, there's a lot of horses in the north, but not many in the south. And I really appreciate that. Treasure resources. Treasure resources now have passive effects on your empire in addition to creating treasure fleets. So I would be very interested to see what those treasure resources, like the actual effects of them, will be. Unfortunately, we don't have those details in this dev diary. And I can totally understand that they likely wanted to do this because they wanted to make them worth it to improve them and gather them, even if you were focused on treasure fleets. And that's exactly the justification that they give here. Horses, furs, and rubies will create treasure resources when improved in coastal settlements and distant lands. Gold, silver, cocoa, spices, sugar, and tea will continue to be treasure resources. Cocoa, spices, sugar, and tea are divided among the later mandlasses. Blah, 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 blah. Okay. Homelands and distant lands treasure resources are distinguished on a map and a tooltip, and a new symbol on the resource icon. So I like that. These are some great changes. Homelands and distant lands are from each civilization's perspective. So your homelands could be distant lands to another civilization. The distant lands continent in the Antiquity Age no longer spawns placeholder treasure resources for age transition. Interesting. I don't know what that means, but I think if you have figured out a way to explore the distant lands, you could see placeholder treasure resources, basically. So dyes now gives a little bit more happiness. Fish is no longer a factory resource. Instead, it gives +6 food in settlements, but important +3 food in any other settlement. I think this is like just straight up just a major nerf to fish. Massive nerf. However, tin now takes the place of it. We like to boost the growth rate in this effect, but not as the number or scale that fish was granting it. Yeah, fish was kind of overpowered. It's very simple. Improved coastal erosion on continents. Plus, continents shuffle in terra incognita maps to help break up the coastlines more, especially near the poles. Yeah, it definitely felt like the poles had very flat and straight edges. So I appreciate breaking those up a little bit. Gameplay. AI players will now build larger navies when playing on the archipelago map type. AI players will no longer pick city-state bonuses that have been already chosen by another player. Did not know that could even happen. Improved how AI land units handle attacks from hostile naval units. Interesting. So I assume that they will now properly recognize the threat. Improved AI usage of great people, unique civilian units, good stuff. Addressed an issue where AI would sometimes fail to attack nearby enemy units before it attacked a settlement. Addressed a reported issue, prevent legacy cards from being unlocked, blah, 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 blah. There's a larger penalty for stealing technologies in civics. I pretty much don't even really use this feature because I use most of my diplomatic favor for diplomatic influence for warfare stuff, but cool. It takes longer to steal technologies. It was a little bit overpowered. In particular, I think a lot of people did this in multiplayer. You can now counter-spy against as many people as you want. There's a 30% failure chance to espionage actions taken while being counter-spied. Okay, awesome. So generally speaking, just a few little bit of improvements towards espionage. I have it. Espionage. The problem with the espionage is that it's at the bottom of the scroll menu in the diplomacy tree or in the diplomacy screen. So I never really even think of it. It's just never at the forefront of my mind. Yeah, stealing text in civics is a powerful strategy, and there's no counterplayer repercussions. The influence penalty from conquered settlement. When you lose control of the conquered settlement. Okay, that's annoying. So you were just getting way less influence if you're going on a domination game. Environment. Natural disasters on light settings should appear 50% less frequently compared to before. Natural disasters. So generally speaking, natural disasters are just less frequent. I think that's quite nice. I definitely feel like the natural disasters in Civilization 7 felt really frequent and quite punishing at times. So I think toning that down a little bit is a good thing. I also like that bridges can now be purchased in towns. I hope that that comes with some changes to how bridges work, because otherwise I'm kind of curious to see how that's going to work out. Towns with water-based buildings are now considered coastal and will be connected to settlements whose city centres are on the same continent as seen in the continent lines. This is actually quite an interesting change, because before I believe you had to have your city centre on the coast, or right? You have to have the city centre on the coast. But now, as long as you have the fishing key, you're good. You're coastal. So that's quite nice. That will open up that will create a little bit of freedom with how you want to settle. The cost of upgrading a town to a city has been increased in the exploration and modern age. The base cost per city have increased by 100 gold per age. Yeah, upgrading cities is a little bit too easy, and the rewards for upgrading a city are very high, and the cost of upgrading a city is mainly just in the fact that you have to spend like brain power to improve the city. Removed happiness penalties for losing trade routes and spawning or resettling migrant units. I didn't even know that existed. That's how unimportant that was. Buildings with increased cost modifiers can no longer be purchased without sufficient gold. Not entirely sure what that means. I don't know if I ever ran into this. Using a merchant to connect a city or town that already has a focus will now properly send food from that town without need to reset the focus. That's an annoying little bug. I didn't even know that existed. I'm glad that it's fixed. Addressed a reported issue that sometimes caused merchants to be unable to connect settlements by building roads within their land trade range. Nice. Addressed a reported issue where some town connections were broken after age transition. Love it. Okay, so generally speaking, your empire is going to be better connected up and all that sort of stuff. We're continuing to make improvements here. We're investigating at least one more known issue where the issues will not correctly update when loading an autosave from the first stage of a turn. Okay, they continue to find bugs. Awesome. Buildings that require a full tile can now be built over tiles with only a single obsolete building. That's a huge quality of life upgrade. That's great. Perfect. Beautiful. Awesome. The expansionist legend attribute now correctly reduces the cost of upgrading a town. Okay, it just wasn't working. Unique quarters no longer re-trigger their effects after being repaired. Yeah, that's probably a good one. You don't want to get those free relics every time your thing gets damaged. The Manhattan Project can no longer be started by a single player in multiple different settlements at the same time. It's probably a good idea. Remove the previous hard cap effect of population growth when stockpiling food. The growth formula now scales quadratically instead of cubically, so each growth event only modestly increases the number of turns until the next population increase. So we'll do an investigation on this, but basically part of the problem that they have here is that food and growth is calculated on each individual city. There's kind of like a couple of core problems with the game that I have right now. One of them is that food and growth is calculated on a per city basis rather than on an empire-wide or global basis. I think you need to take into account global population, your empire population, and your local population. You need to have a little bit of a calculation of each of those. You need to think about all of those things. And right now it's only doing local population. The other thing is settlement limit. I think they need to invert how settlement limit works. I think it needs to be that if you're at or below the settlement limit, you get a bonus, and if you're above it, you just don't get a bonus, because I think the penalty at being above is just kind of crap. Independent powers. Independent powers will no longer be removed after listing all their units. This finally explains why independent powers that I was farming for experience would disappear. I'm glad to know that is weird. Dispersing an independent power by a naval unit no longer removes adjacent player districts if the borders are touching. Amazing. Great people can no longer be used on ineligible tiles with no effects. The technology tutorial. Okay. Mementos. Addressed a reported issue where Confucius's brush and scroll memento could cause food needed for the next growth event to become 0 or negative. The lantern memento will no longer grant its effect when not equipped. Interesting. Bugs. Oh my god, yes. Packed units can now be upgraded simultaneously using the upgrade all button on the commander that the units are packed into. Beautiful. The production cost and maintenance of cavalry have been increased. The production cost increases by 10 production per age, and the maintenance cost has been increased by 1 gold in all ages. I think this is a slight move in the correct direction for balance with regards to the balance between different units. However, this does not fundamentally address the problem, which is that cavalry is just better than infantry, and I'm still not going to stop spamming cavalry. The initiative promotion now applies consistently on rivers and rough terrain and continues to function correctly after age transitions. Naval units are now less likely to be placed in inland lakes on age transition. Players now correctly receive the aerodrome commander after conquering a city with an aerodrome. Finally, okay, I think this is like the second or third time they've tried to fix this bug. Hopefully it's fixed this time. Fertility rights now applies to all settlements, not just cities. I don't know what fertility rights is. This is a problem sometimes with the patch notes. Sometimes it's good to actually include what the thing does. I don't remember what fertility rights does. God of Healing now requires an altar in the capital, but the effect is still global. Okay, I appreciate this compromise. Let's see. Chola. The Samayam unique ability now adds the correct amount of extra trade capacity. The Quipu tradition will no longer stack with slotted and slotted on the same turn. Oh boy, that sounded like a fun bug. Addressed a reported issue where using Mexico's great person Jose Maria Morelos on a commander could result in units disappearing from the map. Fun. Prussia. Settlements now only use Prussian names. Interesting. I wonder what was going on there. We've got research queuing. Okay, finally. Really nice. So that a locked tech or civic can now be selected to automatically queue the techs needed to unlock the selected one the fastest. Added a repair all button in the production purchase menu. When there are multiple tiles that need to be repaired, purchasing will instantly repair everything and selecting for production will add all to the queue. Oh! Goated patch. 10 out of 10 patch. Added a highlight on tiles when a great person is selected to indicate whether they can activate their ability. Yes! Oh, this patch was worth it alone for these changes. These changes plus the, I forgot what the other one was, the upgrade all button. Oh, Civilopedia. I just got some upgrades, controller stuff. Tech and civics will now show if a wonder is already built or unlocked by a player. Hallelujah. This is starting to push this patch up into God tier. Addressed a reported issue with a player. It was open challenges menu infinite times, causing overlapping and freezing. Oh, bug, new icon to treasure resources, city banners. Yes, they fixed the city banners disappearing, I hope. The exploration age tutorial can be bypassed or dismissed when they delete their scout unit during the antiquity age. You can now place a building in the building placement menu after placing tell me or more options. Golden age universities, ribbon yields, town yield icons. Yes, town yields now properly change after changing a town's focus. Autofill legacy cards now only select unused cards. Oh. Reduce the frequency of town specialization notifications. They will now only appear if the town has just unlocked a new focus or the settlement has just grown and won't grow again for more than 20 turns. Yeah, I love it. This is a nice change. 20 turns is a nice little ballpark. I think the ultimate evolution of this feature would be to allow me to choose how long I want this to be. Addressed a reported issue where the settlement raised. This is a banger patch. It directly addresses many of the issues that I personally have with the game. Show you who to go to war when you spread religion, divine right no longer lists effects twice. Oh, finally. When replacing a building on existing rural, explains that rural population will not be lost. Finally. Okay, I think this was like a bit of a misconception that people didn't understand. Yields greater than 10 are now rounded in the leader ribbon. Yes, it's not necessary. Thank you. Hyphens removed from Hawaiian city names because they don't have hyphens. The settlement converted to a religion. Cool. Resolve text disappearing when viewing and revealing military sabotage. Addressed a reported issue where Haleokeoe Wonder would reveal camera would play with missing text. Updated the phrasing on locked attribute nodes. I really just need to put like a little chain across it so when they're locked. Added estimated turns until the next phase of the crisis to the social policy screen. That's useful. Added the turns remaining until a diplomatic action can be performed again. Yes. Plot tooltips will now appear underneath other 2D UI elements. I will have to investigate what that means. Specialist tooltip information now only appears in urban plots. Yes. Tooltips descriptions for game setup screens. Yes. Tooltips now correctly appear after the tile selector is moved off screen and returned into view. Civ relationship is now displayed when viewing a unit's tooltip. Tooltips now appear correctly when viewing buildings in the city details breakdown menu. Yes! Hallelujah! Amazing. These are great changes. This is another 10 out of 10 patch. Everything here is wonderful. This is just straight up better game. This is better game right here. Added narrative events. Awesome. Cool new narrative events. Sick. Some audio improvements. Platform specific improvements. Sick. Again, they knocked it out of the park. 1.2.0. That's a 10 out of 10 patch. What is this? Like the fourth 10 out of 10 patch that they've knocked out of the park in a row. I still do have some thoughts that I want to talk about with regards to the food and growth situation. Basically, the problem is that like the curve, the cost. So if we say like this is how many pops you have, and this arrow here is food. The curve looks like this. As you gain more pops, the amount of food you need just goes like this. And I think the problem is they need to add another dimension of this, and it needs to include how many settlements you have. And basically like it needs to be pops plus empire pops. And then they need to make this like flatter because the scaling part will come from the number of cities you have. That would be my opinion. I'll go into details onto how and why I think these things, but that will be the product of another video. Civilization 7 1.2.0 10 out of 10 patch. Well done developers, pat on the back, great job, love you guys, very happy with that patch. I'm excited to go play it. I love you all very much and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.